Alabama in, Miami in, Notre Dame out. And a shocking outcome delivered this afternoon by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. In their final rankings and assignment of the 2025 CFP bracket, the Fighting Irish are the first team out, and they will not have an opportunity to compete in the 12-team playoff and return to the national championship game. So after being in every single playoff ranking as far as being inside the bracket in the previous 5 weeks, Notre Dame is not in this one. Miami makes the jump over the Irish via their head-to-head win in week 1. And so the Irish now await their bowl game assignment here this afternoon, and again will not be competing in the college football playoff here in 2025. We break it all down next right here on Shamrock Sports. And we welcome you to the second floor of the Duncan Student Center here on this Sunday afternoon. Myself, Tyler Reidy, along with Trey Cotey and Michael Fishburne here as we break down a pretty stunning situation here, at least in the eyes that we came into from last night's conference championship final results and into today's final college football playoff selection show and rankings for the bracket. Notre Dame, the first team out, with Alabama remaining the number 9 seed, and Miami jumping over the Irish for the first time in any of the CFP rankings and securing that number 10 berth. Trey, I will start with you. What do you make of it? Notre Dame not in the dance this year. Certainly not what we expected here heading into today.
No, absolutely not. And I remember a few earlier shows this year we were talking about, excuse me, is a 10-2 Notre Dame team good enough to make the CFP with 2 combined losses by 4 points? And I'm still kind of trying to get my wits about me, Tyler. I can't quite comprehend this, and I feel like I saw this coming. I was talking to you a few weeks ago, over a week ago, and I said Notre Dame's not going to make it.
Absolutely.
I just felt something that it wasn't going to happen. And we're sitting here on this Sunday, and everyone on campus seems a little bit shocked, Tyler.
Yeah, and to go off what Trey was saying, my response to you is there's no world where Notre Dame doesn't make it unless BYU were to win. And that seemed to be the conversation in Las Vegas, on Notre Dame's campus, all around, just that Notre Dame was in this college football playoff. Yet, of course, obviously they're not. And my first reaction is there's no consistency across this entire committee. There's none. I mean, as we're seeing here, we're seeing for the Notre Dame-Miami game that, of course, was the committee's final decision as to why Notre Dame didn't make it. Miami won by 3 points earlier this season, but just it doesn't make sense. You know, Alabama doesn't get punished for their SEC loss where they got absolutely dominated, but Notre Dame gets punished by BYU getting dominated, and then they're next to Miami. I just don't get it. Notre Dame's obviously out. It's just it's a heartbreaker across campus.
Yeah, and I think kind of the consensus is if Miami was ranked above Notre Dame a week ago, that would at least make a little bit of sense. But neither team had a new data point entered into their resume, and I've heard a lot of people talking, you know, the resume is now complete, and they were ranked next to each other. And if they're ranked next to each other, Miami's better because of that head-to-head matchup. But why was that not the case a week ago? And if the answer is BYU is between Notre Dame and Miami, I just don't think that's a very good reason for how you can have a team ranked 10th versus 12th. It doesn't make much sense to me. And with the inconsistent logic, Ohio State not dropping, Alabama not dropping, but BYU does. And Hunter Yurachek said that the main reason that Miami jumped is because BYU lost 34-7 to Texas Tech in that Big 12 championship game in such dramatic fashion. But if that's the case, surely then Alabama's lost to Georgia where they had -3 rushing yards should drop them out of the 9th spot.
Shamrock Sports had more rushing yards courtesy Ethan Laszlo for finding the statistic.
They did
good
indeed.
Lord, right?
I still can't quite wrap my head around it.
Yeah, you're seeing there on the right side of your screen the way the entire top 25 final rankings broke out with the conference championships playing out yesterday, and it seemed that everything that happened yesterday across the 4 power conferences favored Notre Dame to the utmost possibility. In the Big 12, BYU being blown out by Texas Tech at BYU 1. That was obviously a threat to take Notre Dame out of it straight up. In the SEC, Alabama, a big loss by 21 to Georgia in that rematch of Bama's big win in Athens at the end of September. We were thinking maybe Alabama gets punished by a spot if BYU is too for their big loss. That did not happen in the ACC. Duke took down Virginia in overtime, but did not make the playoff by virtue of the two Group of 5 teams beating out the Blue Devils for that last automatic qualifier. And then in the Big Ten, Indiana over Ohio State in that clash of the Titans to achieve Indiana that #1 overall seed. So as far as yesterday goes, I think the big question right now is what could Notre Dame have done? What could have happened to get Notre Dame into this thing? Because we were really thinking at the end of yesterday, it all went right. Clearly it didn't. What went wrong?
Absolutely. And yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is what went wrong for Notre Dame is there was no world, based off of what we saw, where Notre Dame was in before this past weekend. Right? I mean, it's easy to point to yesterday's games, of, Bama, Georgia. Bama got blown out. Bama didn't move, right? BYU got blown out, but they had a competitive ball game for that entire first half. They moved a lot, right? So I think the main thing that comes out of mind for me is just, again, I said it before, I'll say it again, the inconsistency that we're seeing across this entire committee, because it's easy to point to yesterday as a Notre Dame fan. I mean, you had Inside the Irish on Instagram changing his logo to the Texas Tech logo and the Georgia logo, because Notre Dame fans all around the world, Vegas, completely thought that Notre Dame was in based off what happened yesterday. Everything seemed to have gone right, except for maybe the ACC, which Trey's going to get into a little in a second. But I just think that Notre Dame was led on too long for a narrative to be written.
Yeah, I completely agree. And head of the committee, Hunter Yurachek, said earlier this morning, or this afternoon, I suppose, that the reason Notre Dame didn't get in is because BYU lost in such dramatic fashion. So then the head-to-head came and held a premium, to use his exact verbiage. I think there's something more here, and Yurachek did come out and say this was not the case, but I cannot help but feel that part of this is being driven maybe by the political side of the college football world, which is that Duke won the ACC, and the ACC was going to have no representatives in the 12-team playoff. And I really think that's just a bit of an issue. James Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, that would not have flown.
No.
But I think when this format was kind of thought of, no one thought that the ACC champion was going to be below the winner of the Sun Belt. That was never a thought. It was going to be the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, the ACC, and whatever Group of 5. Not two Group of 5 and then have the ACC looking out or on the outside looking in. So I think that there was a lot of pressure from Duke winning that game to put Miami in, more than there already was to begin with, which was already a large amount as the narrative kind of was suggesting online. And I think that was maybe the final nail in the coffin for this Irish football team.
Yeah, we'll talk more in depth about that revealed bracket later on in the show. But first, earlier this weekend, we saw a lot more publicity around Notre Dame making their case for that college football playoff berth between the athletic director, Pete Bavacqua, on Friday and head coach Marcus Freeman throughout the weekend on various outlets. Molly O'Malley recaps Notre Dame's case for that final CFP spot. And on the other side, we take a look at how Notre Dame now moves forward from the position they have gotten into without the college football playoff berth. Molly, take it away.
Hi, I'm Molly O'Malley, standing right outside the Newt Rockne gates of Notre Dame Stadium, where just inside they hold Marcus Freeman's press conferences each week. I've been attending these press conferences since the beginning of the season, really following along with the team and what Marcus Freeman has to say. This team is on an uphill battle right now with a 10-2 season, 10-game winning streak. Marcus Freeman has talked a lot about the progression of this team. As the season is coming down to the finale and the final decisions of the college playoffs, let's see what he has to say.
A little bit of confusion. You're confused in terms of what we could have done differently, right? And why we fell when we won 49 to 20. I think we were up 42-6 going in the fourth quarter. And that's the only thing that, and it's not I don't spend time talking about other teams, but it's just like, okay, what could we have done differently? I don't know, right? It's just that you always look for cause and effect. You look for a reasoning why, you go up or you fall. And for me, it was just you didn't see a great explanation for why we fell when we had a performance we did last Saturday. And so just disappointed, right, that we fell, just because I don't necessarily agree with it, because I think our guys did a good enough job versus Stanford to warrant not falling in the rankings, right? And I don't know if a team did something that much better than us to jump us. I don't know. That's for the committee to kind of address.
You heard it here first from a coach who is confident in this team day in and day out, almost lost for words about the question of Notre Dame being in the playoffs. Will this committee give them enough grace to have a spot to fight for the championship? More to come on this later. Thanks for watching this special edition of Sunday with Shamrock Sports.
Molly, thank you very much. Notre Dame, of course, not given that grace by the College Football Playoff Committee here, with the rankings revealed in final this afternoon and the Irish being the first team out. Well, now with Ryan Murphy and Tyler Reidy, we are the sports directors as well as WVFI, the student radio voice of the Fighting Irish. And, well, we were thinking maybe come next weekend we might have a first-round college football playoff destination to attend to. That is not the case. So thinking about bowl season now here, as we'll be covering that game for you regardless on WVFI. And boy, Murph, your first reaction, certainly not what we expected here today as Notre Dame heads into bowl season now without the CFP.
No, I'm as shocked as anyone is, and I think the first question for me here is like, where does Notre Dame go from here now, right? We can hash over the decision by the College Football Playoff Committee all we want, and I think we should. It's worthy of scrutiny. But what if you're Notre Dame do you do? And I'm sure that they'll reevaluate everything. That's something that Marcus Freeman talks about all the time in the wake of losses, but they've never quite had a loss like this where they've not even been on the field. And this is a big moment, I think, for Notre Dame as an athletic department, just because this school hasn't had a problem with needing to go undefeated to make the college football playoff. But with the things that need to align for Notre Dame to make it, seeming so high at this juncture, this is a big moment because needing the belief that this team can win a national championship is important for this football program. It's important to keep Marcus Freeman here. It's important to recruit the next Jeremiah Love, and that belief is, I think, under some real scrutiny at this point in time because, man, this Notre Dame team is as good as we've seen in a while, and for them not to even make the college football playoff, there's a lot that needs to be evaluated.
Yeah, and now to preview a different look for Notre Dame heading into a bowl game that does not have any national championship implications. The Irish will, of course, end up in one of the highest profile non-CFP bowl matchups against potentially the likes of a BYU or a Vanderbilt or Texas. We shall see as the afternoon continues. But just from that standpoint, what changes with Notre Dame? Obviously, some key starters won't be available for that game. What do you look for from this Notre Dame team as a whole now heading into that setup with a bowl game that doesn't have the implications?
Yeah, I mean, I don't envy the position of Marcus Freeman. I think this is probably the most difficult bowl game anyone has ever had to motivate their team for. They're a young group overall. I think I'd be shocked to see the guys like Jeremiah Love and even Jadarian Price play in that game. So I guess you have to come at it from the perspective of getting your young guys some reps. But I could also see maybe Notre Dame, I mean, I'm not suggesting that they might not want to play in this game, right? But I think you have to think about it as a possibility. Clearly the college football world didn't need Notre Dame to play this weekend in order to make any judgments about them, so why should they play again this season, risk potential injuries? I can see that argument happening. Do I think it will? I don't know.
Yeah, time will tell, but since Marcus Freeman took over in full as the head football coach of Notre Dame at the start of 2022, the Irish are 2-0 in these non-CFP bowl games. The Gator Bowl win against South Carolina in 22, and in 2023, the Sun Bowl in El Paso against Oregon State. Murph, thank you very much. We'll have coverage for you regardless of where Notre Dame ends up in bowl season here coming down toward New Year's on the Voice of the Fighting Irish, WVFI. But first, we continue here on NDTV with our Shamrock Sports reaction to the College Football Playoff Selection Show. And now the case for Jeremiah Love and his Heisman possibilities after Conference Championship weekend with Chris Daly. Chris.
Jeremiah Love is one of the best players in Notre Dame history. This season alone, he's got an Irish record 21 total touchdowns. He's averaging nearly 7 yards an attempt, and he's 4th in the nation in rushing yards despite being 22nd in total attempts. As a result, Love has become Notre Dame's first serious Heisman contender since Manti Te'o. The question now is, how serious? Can Love really win the Heisman in less than a week's time? Let's take a peep at J. Love's Heisman probabilities. To gauge Jay Love's Heisman odds, let's first see how he stacks up against other running backs this season. Cam Cook of Jacksonville State leads the nation with 1,659 yards, but that's on 295 carries against weaker competition. Missouri's Ahmad Hardy is second with 1,560 yards on 241 touches. Both of them have 16 rushing touchdowns. Love, he's got 1,372 yards on 199 carries, almost 100 fewer than Cook and 42 fewer than Hardy. He's averaging more yards per rush than both of them. What Love has been able to do while working alongside future NFLer Jadarian Price is absolutely unreal. Love is top 5 in rushing yards despite being outside the top 20 in rushing attempts. All of this without a doubt cements his place as a Heisman candidate. So now let's take a look at Love's Heisman competition, Fernando Mendoza and Diego Pavia. Because the truth is, Julian Sayin may be in the city but won't win after losing the Big Ten championship last night. Frontrunner Fernando Mendoza finished the season with 2,980 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 6 INTs. You can't overstate how impressive it is what Mendoza has done with Indiana. He's led perennial Big Ten bottom feeder, the Hoosiers, to the top seed in the playoffs. There is only one fault in his resume, however, that may help Love's chances. A piece of Irish propaganda, if you will. Mendoza has only one 300-plus yard passing game, and it came against a Michigan State team that eventually fired their head coach. By comparison, recent Heisman-winning quarterbacks Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, and Bryce Young had 7, 8, and 10 300-plus yard games respectively. This isn't to rag on Mendoza, but rather show that he's not by any means untouchable. As it stands, he's currently the leading horse right now. His odds on FanDuel sit at minus 105. Then there's the fresh prince of Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia, who was briefly the frontrunner on FanDuel last night while he attended UFC 323 in the middle of that Big Ten championship game. Pavia outduels Mendoza in rushing yards, adjusted for sacks with 907 on the year. He's thrown for more passing yards than Mendoza, and he won the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award on Friday night. He's also peaking at the right time. In his last 4 games, he has statistically outperformed Mendoza's last 5. Not too shabby. But at the end of the day, Pavia did lose to Alabama and Texas, 2 ranked games, although he had a fantastic showing against the Longhorns. So the question now becomes, where does this leave Love? On the outside looking in, honestly, most likely. For Love to win the Heisman, the voters will have to look beyond the stats and at a magical thing called Heisman moments, because that's where Jay Love shines. Mendoza's moment, probably his perfectly placed ball last night to give the Hoosiers the lead. For Pavia, it's got to be that game against LSU. The one where he hit the Heisman pose and introduced himself to the world. For Love, it's better to ask, what moment do you want? The kid from St. Louis has become a human highlight reel, all the while leading Notre Dame to 10 consecutive victories. To create the history Love has created at Notre Dame, he surpassed Jerome Bettis for the single-season touchdown record. Sure ain't easy. And to do it in a fashion he has, well, it's simply unheard of. His untimely injury against Stanford probably cost him the Heisman, but he's earned every bit of attention in that conversation. Every touchdown he's scored, every time he's broken free, every hurdle he's completed, it all screams Heisman worthy. From Notre Dame Television, I'm Chris Taylor.
Thank you, Chris. Hard to believe we've probably seen the final game for Jeremiah Love in a Notre Dame uniform. What a record-breaking and remarkable season it was for him, even if it does fall short of the Heisman Trophy, which, of course, will be awarded Saturday night, this December 13th in New York City. All right, let's get into some resume comparison here, talk about the deservingness, or I suppose lack thereof, of Notre Dame here in the eyes of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. It came down to 3 teams for those 2 spots, 9 and 10 in the bracket: Alabama, Miami, and Notre Dame. Of course, Bama 10-3 with one of the best wins in college football at Georgia September 27th. But we thought maybe that loss undone by the blowout loss to Georgia in the SEC Championship. Clearly not. Miami, 2 losses to unranked ACC foes at 10-2, but the head-to-head win on Notre Dame, and of course the Irish with the 0-2 start against Miami and A&M, both top 10 and playoff-bound teams before the 10-game win streak. Trey, I'll go to you first. Did Notre Dame deserve to make the playoff? Did the bet that they made with the 0-2 start, should it have been too much for them to overcome? Because ultimately it was.
I think it's hard to look at this from an unbiased perspective, and I think that's something worth mentioning. Mm-hmm. But I also think that Notre Dame is perhaps the hottest team in the country right now. That's what Pete Pavakwa said on ESPN. on Friday afternoon. And I think he's right. They have the longest win streak in the country other than the Indiana Hoosiers, the #1 overall team in the nation. And they've won these games by almost 30 points a contest. They haven't really had a close game, and you can say they haven't played anyone, but they've played similar competition to Miami, and Miami dropped 2 of those games. And I think when you're looking at it, the committee's mission statement is they want to have the 12 best teams. Notre Dame is 3rd in FPI. They're above Miami in strength of record. Almost every metric you can find, Notre Dame has the edge. So if you're looking for the 12 best teams, I really think it's hard to not include Notre Dame in that list. And sure, you can say Miami beat them head-to-head, no doubt about that, no disagreements. Miami may have played much better than them in that game. It was a 3-point contest. Miami only had 25 more yards. I think the 2 turnovers, the fumble, and C.J. Carr's interception in his first career start may have made the difference there. But compared to today, I think you'd be really hard-pressed to find someone that could say with a straight face they think Miami's a better football team than Notre Dame. And if you're trying to base who makes it and who doesn't off of who is the best team in the country, I think leaving Notre Dame out is a severe lapse of judgment.
I completely agree, and I think that when we're talking the metrics, the one thing that you hear talking heads and people around sports media like referring to is that head-to-head loss.
Yes.
And that doesn't come without an asterisk. It doesn't come without an asterisk. You know, I understand Notre Dame lost. And here, right here, we're seeing the resume comparison between Alabama, Miami, and Notre Dame, where you see some of those metrics that Trey's talking about between strength of schedule and strength of record being better than Miami on the left-hand side. Obviously, Alabama there on the left was in confidently according to the committee. But the one metric people reference is the head-to-head loss. And it comes with an asterisk because that's Notre Dame's first game of the year. You have a freshman quarterback starting his first ever college football game. You have a defensive coordinator coaching as a DC for the first time since 2020. This is a Notre Dame team that Greg McElroy correctly said a couple hours ago had not found its identity. They hadn't. And yet, throughout the season, they did. And the one statistic that I really think just shows how inherently flawed, and we're going to talk more about the flaws in a second, but how inherently flawed this is from November 4th on till now, so it's about 33 days or so, Notre Dame was ranked higher than Miami in every single one of those CFP rankings until December 7th, today, where they magically flipped them. Notre Dame was ranked as high as from 10 to 18th. Miami progressively climbed. Notre Dame stayed the same. I don't get what would have changed between Notre Dame and Miami, the evaluation of it, in a weekend where neither team played a football game. Neither team played. Miami didn't make their conference championship game. Duke, 7-5, had more of an argument to make their conference championship game than Miami because they won the right games. They have their schedule. You have your schedule for a reason. Miami beat Notre Dame. Yes, I understand that. But they lost to 2 unranked teams in SMU and Louisville in 2 games where Miami looked pitiful. Notre Dame isn't in. Miami is. I get the head-to-head metric, but why consider it now?
Also, to jump on that point, if you're saying what happened this weekend, well, really the only thing that could have bolstered either side is Boise State won the Mountain West. Yeah. That improved Notre Dame's strength of schedule and their strength of record.
Absolutely.
So if anything,
win over a conference champion.
The only team that really had something this weekend go in their favor between Alabama, Notre Dame, and Miami was the Irish.
Yeah, it's just sad all around, Tyler.
Yeah, so there's your system conversation. You guys got all out. Any more here? Because I think I might need my one shot right here as far as the system goes. If you're an Irish fan here, watching this ranking reveal, thinking about the playoff, you can't be frustrated that Notre Dame did not get in and Miami had that head-to-head advantage. I was down there at Hard Rock Stadium in August. I covered that game. Miami was the better team, probably by more than the final score of 27-24 would suggest. And yes, you can say it was August 31st, but there are no preseason games in college football. There are only 12 of these guaranteed opportunities, as Marcus Freeman preaches for Notre Dame, and you've got to try to take advantage of all of them regardless of where your team is at. So Miami, the head-to-head of Notre Dame, I completely understand the argument. What I don't understand is how that argument was applied here by the committee. It just does not make a whole lot of sense with what Michael pointed out, Notre Dame being ahead of the Hurricanes in every single ranking put out by the committee throughout this month of November. And now finally it's after a point where neither team plays a game that you flip them over head-to-head. It's just, it doesn't make sense. When they were 2 spots apart going into conference championship weekend, how is that not close enough for Miami and Notre Dame to be considered for that head-to-head role? Yes, BYU is in between, but if you really wanted to do it in terms of Miami and Notre Dame in the head-to-head, go BYU, Miami, Notre Dame right off the rip. So it did not make a whole lot of sense how that was applied in terms of using the head-to-head in the final week. And also, the way the two conference championship losers around the two teams were treated. Alabama, 21-point loss to Georgia. Yes, their body of work speaks for itself going in, but much of that seemed to be undone by the big loss to Georgia, a team they had beaten previously at the end of September. Bama held up at number 9, but BYU allowed to drop, despite a very similar game and result in the Big 12 Conference Championship game, falling beneath Miami. So for me, it's very unfortunate to see the way that the committee applied its rules. It's really bringing up a conversation in my mind of whether you need to continue to have these week-to-week rankings, because in my eyes it sort of boxes the committee into a system that it has to continue to try and uphold and adjust as new data points come in. And I think it was a failure here this season, and much of that's being exposed. So if you're a Notre Dame fan, this is not about the head-to-head with Miami. This is about the way the system was applied, and I think it was done so, unfortunately. But we continue our conversation right after this with the look at the bracket in full. Some interesting matchups heading in to the first round, December 19th and 20th, with the bracket now out in complete form. Shamrock Sports continues right after this on NDTV.
No one told you life was gonna be this way. Your job's a joke, you broke, your love life's the old way. It's like you're always stuck in second gear, when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year. But I'll be there for you when the rain starts to pour. I'll be there for you, like I've been there before. I'll be there for you, 'cause I'm there for you too.
And welcome back on Shamrock Sports. Our coverage continues after the college football playoff bracket was revealed just a couple of hours ago. Notre Dame not in the mix here, but we have all 12 teams now. We have the matchup set for the first round. We also do know now on this bracket here, Texas Tech, Indiana, that side of the bracket is the Peach Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, Ohio State, Georgia in the semifinals. Indiana's got the Rose Bowl at the first round bye, Texas Tech, the Orange Bowl in Miami, Georgia, the Sugar Bowl, Ohio State, the Cotton Bowl for those quarterfinal matchups. And of course, the first round before it, Alabama, Oklahoma, is your Friday night game. So you can see Miami A&M, that's the matchup between Notre Dame's 2 losses, and then the group of 5 teams in there as well, JMU, Tulane, no Duke as the ACC champion, but that conference still represented by Miami. Trey, I'll start with you. Which of these matchups are you looking for, not just in the first round, but perhaps beyond as we see this bracket flush out in December and January?
Yeah, well, I think Miami, Texas A&M is obviously the ones Irish fans are going to look at and say, I wonder what's going to happen here. As the 2 teams that obviously took down the Irish earlier in the season by a combined 4 points. I'll just remind the crowd again. Can you tell I'm a little bit bitter? So that's one to keep an eye on. But one that I'm really excited for is to see how the Red Raiders of Texas Tech do later on in this tournament. They've had a fantastic season. Watching the Big 12 championship yesterday, I mean, they looked absolutely incredible against the Cougars of BYU. And Oregon is a team that I'm not completely sold on. Lost by double digits to Indiana in Eugene. They are obviously I think they're going to take care of James Madison, but they really don't have a signature win.
We'll see what Coach Chesney's squad does, right?
There you go. Shout out Bob Chesney. I know you got recruited by a little bit fish. But Oregon, a team that I'm not super sold on. We'll see how Dante Moore does under a little bit of pressure. And I think that the defense of Texas Tech is really going to be a difference maker in that one with Jacob Rodriguez, Ben Roberts, who had 2 interceptions in that game. I like to see what the Red Raiders are going to do and maybe have a potential matchup down the road with number 1 Indiana.
Yeah, and just kind of to build upon that, maybe a conversation you didn't hit on is something I'm really interested to see is Tulane-Ole Miss. This is a rematch from earlier this season where Tulane got throttled, but Tulane's been playing some of their best football. Quarterback Jake Retzlaff, transfer out of BYU, been playing phenomenally. Of course, Tulane's head coach now going to Florida. But Ole Miss, home football game with a defensive coordinator now as your head coach. Lane Kiffin, of course, gone to LSU. Ole Miss's offensive coordinator is gone. It's going to be interesting to see how close that team is. They haven't moved in the rankings at all after this coaching disparity.
They actually moved up.
They moved up, right?
They
Yeah, they
jumped
haven't
Texas
moved
A&M
down.
somehow.
So they've lost maybe perhaps some of the most important pieces of their team from a coaching perspective. It's going to be interesting to see how well they hold together against a group of 5 opponent that isn't that you can't write off Tulane, right? You cannot write off Tulane. Oregon JMU, I just got to say it because, you mentioned it. I love you, Coach Chesney. Keep your number on my phone. I know you're coaching UCLA, but love you, Coach Ches. JMU, Oregon's going to blow them out of the water, but it's going to be so great to see Coach Chesney on that big screen. But of these 4 teams with a bye, I'm really interested to see how Indiana, Ohio State, and Texas Tech will handle the bye. Obviously, Georgia had it last year. Kirby Smart's squad took on Notre Dame in New Orleans, and they lost, right? I think that Georgia, honestly, with that experience of having the bye and knowing how to handle it, Georgia's going to be more dangerous than any of those other 3 teams unless Signetti's squad, Ryan Day's squad, the Texas Tech squad to figure it out. The bye's tough. It's interesting. But I do think, number 1, Indiana Hoosiers, that defense is a lot better than people think. This is an interesting bracket, but really interested to see how those byes come into play, and don't knock off Tulane.
All right, so rolling that over into our national championship picks, you got the Hoosiers there at the number 1?
Yeah, absolutely. Coming over to the, you'll see it a little bit later after this upcoming commercial break, but I think that Indiana, shout out Dylan Wallace, we love you, D-Wall. I may be saying it for D-Wall. Also, I just need to mention this, I'm wearing a green Notre Dame tie. That's how freaking confident I was that Notre Dame was going to make this college football playoff. I'm freaking wearing green on TV right now. Notre Dame's not in it, but Indiana and Notre Dame, they share a state, Hey, Indiana may not even win. Indiana may lose to Oklahoma or Alabama, but I just got to root for a team inside the state. I mean, good Lord. So, yeah, we'll see it in a second, but the Indiana Hoosiers, I'm going to spoil it for all you guys. I have more than the Natty.
I'll go next year. It's certainly getting tougher and tougher to doubt Indiana. I think they'd be my secondary pick here, but I think when you're talking about the college football playoff, you're thinking about teams who are peaking at the right time, playing their best football in November and December, and for me, the best exemplification of that is the 3 seed Georgia. They're going to have that matchup against either Ole Miss or Tulane. Ole Miss, we have no idea how they're going to look right now with the departure of Lane Kiffin. For all we know, Tulane could go in Oxford and win that, although it's a big spread right there. But Georgia, I think this Ohio State game against Miami or A&M is going to be a dogfight. I think Georgia gets out of that quarterfinal a lot easier. I think their path might be a little bit more simple than it looks here with this cluster of teams down below. But from a pure basic standpoint, I think Georgia's the best-looking team in college football right now. They, of course, have the pedigree of Kirby Smart, the back-to-back championships in 21 and 22, and I think continuing to draw from that. They go on another deep run, avenge last year's early exit against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl in that same building, and go on to win it all. Trey.
I like the Georgia pick a lot. Gunnar Stockton should be getting more Heisman love, in my opinion. I think as you mentioned, they've probably been the best team in college football, maybe other than Signetti's Hoosiers, over the last 5 or 6 weeks. And I think a big reason for that is the play of Stockton. But looking at that Texas game or even the Alabama game yesterday, they look almost unbeatable, force to be reckoned with. What I think is going to determine who wins this year's national championship, it's going to be right there. We're going to go right there. Whoever wins between Georgia and Ohio State, I'm going to assume that both of those teams get there pretty easily. I think that's going to be the matchup that we're really all going to have our eyes on. And maybe it's hard to say that, Michael, after Indiana just beat Ohio State yesterday. How can you say they're confidently better? I think this is going to be a little bit of a Michigan situation. We saw Ohio State lose to Michigan last year and not make the Big Ten championship game. They really didn't have that close of a contest in the playoff there, knocking off Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and the Fighting Irish in that national championship game. I think Ryan Day's boys are maybe even better than last year, and yesterday was maybe the punch in the throat they needed to kind of right the ship and really lock in towards this final stretch of the season. So I like the Buckeyes to go back-to-back.
All right, there we go. Notre Dame not in it, of course. You see them there in the bottom right corner as that first team out, but the playoff begins Friday, December 19th, Alabama and Oklahoma. Let's take one more break here on Shamrock Sports and return to wrap things up for the football season up next.
Welcome to the studio.
Yeah, I forgot to do
Avery
the
White,
commercial between
station manager
What's
here at
next?
Notre Dame Television. And because we all work together, we get very close. you might say a little too close.
Yeah, Trey. I like what you're doing right here. Yep. Oh, that looks really good. Yep. And then when you're down, it's all in the hips. Yep. It's all in the fire. Fire. Yeah, that's beautiful, dude. Dude, great.
And welcome back to the second floor Duncan Student Center, closing things out here on Shamrock Sports with our post-college football playoff reveal show. Just went through our projections for the bracket here in our national championship picks. Michael, I know you wanted to give one more thought there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I talked about it a little bit in realms of Dylan Wallace, but in realms of Kurt Cignetti's ball club and Fernando Mendoza, and again, Pat Coogan, man. Pat freaking Coogan is on the Indiana
If there's
Hoosiers
any
ball
Notre
club.
Dame.
If there's any Notre
That's
Dame,
it.
we got to root for it. We got to root for Pat Coogan. I mean, I said it on Purdue's show, like, what was that, 2 months ago maybe, how much I love Pat Coogan, how much I love him for the Indiana Hoosiers, staying within state lines. So just walking that out a little bit more. I know you were talking about Indiana and Ohio State playing earlier and giving them the throttle they needed, but I don't know, man. I mean, Michigan wasn't in the playoff, right? So Ohio State obviously lost that team. Indiana showed last night that how Kurt Cignetti can coach a ball club to be Ohio State's crux. I think the Indiana Hoosiers, they figure out that bye. Pat Coogan rallies Fernando Mendoza in the ball club with some crazy pregame speech where he's dropping words that I can't say on air. But you know what? Give me the Indiana Hoosiers. Give it for me, Dylan Wallace. I don't know why. I just love Indiana, and I love the state so much that I'm wearing a green tie in Notre Dame for them to not make the playoffs. So, Indiana Hoosiers. So, on a little quick spiel, that's all. That's what I got for you.
All right, well, there are the national championship picks. You saw them there on the screen. IU for yourself, Ohio State for Trey, Georgia for me here as we
Sticking
close
with the
things
top
out.
three.
Sticking with the top three. Yeah,
really
creative.
ambitious over
Really
here.
creative.
Yeah, well, maybe you get the inverse of last year where all the first round teams have the success. Things got to even out. I suppose.
Well, when you don't let a Notre Dame, who's third in FPI at a lower end ranking, to make that drama happen, of course the top teams are going to dominate, right?
You never know. We'll see how it plays out, of course, beginning Friday night, 2 Fridays from now, Alabama and Oklahoma in that first round. So that does it here for our fall football coverage on Shamrock Sports. Hard to believe we're saying that, but Michael, Trey, thank you very much. Everybody else, Ryan Murphy, of course, I'll have the call with him of the bowl game on WVFI in a few weeks' time. Molly O'Malley, Chris Daly for their segments, and everybody else behind the scenes and who pitched in all semester long for our coverage of another enjoyable Notre Dame football season that ends regular season-wise at 10-2 and just a bit short of that college football playoff. And, of course, thank you to all of you for tuning in and being with us throughout the year, from the preview show of Miami to right here, right now on a disappointing but still entertaining Sunday afternoon. Thank you so very much for tuning in with us all year long. And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you are celebrating at this time. Enjoy it, be safe, be healthy, and again, thank you so much. For all of us here on the second floor of the Duncan Student Center and at NDTV, this is Shamrock Sports.